How are you all? Where are you from? What school? Everybody from the same school?
No.
Tell me, okay, Charles? G-Dub.
Horseman.
Horseman.
Dumberman.
Okay,
Dumberman.
great. What's that? Model? Go ahead, speak up. You know why you're here? We're going to find out, aren't we? All right. Okay, you're going to find out. I'm going to find out.
Good morning. I'd like to welcome you to the West Virginia Archives and History Library. My name is Joe Geiger. I'm the Director of Archives and History and consequently the State Archivist and State Historian of West Virginia. We are very grateful to you for joining us on this significant occasion as we announce the completion of the processing and the creation of an online finding aid for the gubernatorial papers of United States Senator Joe Manchin. I'd like to acknowledge the work of several Archives and History staff members. Deborah Basham, our Assistant Director, worked with me in processing this collection and with help from historian Randy Markham, put together the exhibit of select items from the Manchin administration that you see on the tables. Historian and webmaster Mary Johnson created this wonderful slideshow of more than 100 photographs. Archivist Dick Faust put together the audio-visual display that you see on the screen up here. And Susan Holbrook, who's the secretary for the Archives and History section, arranged and typed up a chronological listing of Governor Manchin's speeches, which can be found on the finding aid. We would like to thank Commissioner Randall Reed Smith and Karen Gresham of the Division of Culture and History, and Mara Boggs and Sarah Payne Scarborough of Senator Manchin's office for making the arrangements for this event. Most importantly, we'd like to thank Senator Manchin for taking time out of his hectic schedule to be with us today. West Virginia Archives and History was established in 1905. Currently, we oversee the Highway Historical Marker Program and serve as staff for the County Records Management and Preservation Board. Archives staff also did the research on the names for the Veterans Memorial and were deeply involved in endeavors to enhance educational opportunities for students of all ages through the Golden Horseshoe Exam, through the West Virginia History Bowl, which was initiated by our commissioner, and especially through the Archives and History website. Our primary mission, however, remains the same: to preserve the memory of the great state of West Virginia. The collections of the state archives include books, manuscripts, photographs, newspapers, maps, state and county records, and architectural drawings. We have papers from most of the state's governors, including our first governor, Arthur I. Borman, and now we are extremely gratified to be entrusted with the preservation of the papers of one of West Virginia's most popular governors, Joe Manchin. This collection includes more than 200 boxes of documents and more than 400,000 images. These materials will be preserved in the state archives to be utilized by researchers for generations to come. West Virginia's first state historian, Virgil Anson Lewis, wrote, "Public documents are the materials for the historian. Without such a collection, he, however much inclined, can never do justice to a state. Nor without them can its people ever have an accurate knowledge of the founding and growth of the institutions, nor of their own development in governmental affairs, educational, and other interests. Not only this, but posterity can not have the means of judging, as it might, of the deeds and principles of action and of the legislation of ancestors. Thus, the state that neglects to preserve its public documents loses much to future generations, to the whole world indeed." I'll now turn the microphone over to the head of the West Virginia Division of Culture and History, Commissioner Randall Reed Smith.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for being here. Joe asked me to introduce the senator, and I thought, what am I going to say? I've introduced Joe Manchin as governor so many times in my life. I think the most important thing that I just want to say is truly a great West Virginian. I met Joe Manchin 15 years ago when I came back from Europe. One of the first people in West Virginia I met that I didn't know from growing up in West Virginia. Was privileged to work with him for 6 years in this position, and he's just a great West Virginian. So please make welcome Senator Joe Manchin.
Thank you, Randall. I appreciate your kind introduction, but I want to thank a few people who made this possible today and really worked hard to make this possible. And I'm going to talk to our young students here, how important this is and how important it is for you one day to look back on your life and be able to see what you left and what you've done, what you contributed, and how much more you still have to give. We're going to talk about that, okay? First of all, Kay Goodwin, our secretary. I want to thank Kay. I think she's here. Martha's here. Martha, where's Martha? Martha? Oh, Martha. Okay. I want to thank Martha for being here on behalf of Kay and all that you've done. And Joe, I thank you for the great job and all the hard work you did. I know it was very difficult, and I know it took a lot of time. To the current staff, former staff, and all the people here. I have some of my staff is with me. I saw Jim Troll, some of them. Who all we had here, Jim? Mike, I got some of my details was here, took care of me, make sure no one harmed me.
Matt Turner.
Where's Matt? Hey, Matt.
Harry.
Yeah.
Robbie
You
Queen.
start, Robbie's over here.
Kelly.
Kelly's here. I looked around, and Charlie, thanks for being here from the governor's office, the chief of staff, Governor Tom, my dear friend, and so many people, Mike Browning, my staff, and Sarah's been with me forever, and Travis back there, and you start looking around, Randall, and the whole team. It's a team effort. One person can't do it. This is about my papers as governor, but it's about basically an awful lot of people that made everything happen that really happened. And that's what's good about this. When you look at this, and I appreciate the students being here, we start looking at our state. We're all a product of our environment. Wherever you're from, wherever you live right now, your family, the friends around you, the people that really kind of shape your life, it's who you are. You either decide that you want to improve on that, you like what you have, you never forget where you came from, and you make sure that you're able to share with others. That's what it's all about. I came from a little coal mining town. Not like any other West Virginia. Most of us come from small communities. Charleston's our largest community. I'd never been to Charleston until I was 19 years old. I'd never been south below Clarksburg or Jackson's Mill Road until I was older. Never traveled that much. We never had the roads to travel on. When I got to college, I started dating a girl named Gail Conley, who's now my wife of 47 years, and she lived in Beckley, and I thought that was the other side of the world. I used to drive down the old road. It took us 6.5 hours to get from Morgantown, from WVU, to Beckley, West Virginia. 6.5 hours. And we would leave after school on Friday, drive late at night. Her father had become ill, and then we'd turn right around and come back on Sunday. It was just something we were expected to do, and we did. But when you think about that, we didn't have the roads. We didn't have any cell phones. You had to stop if you wanted to make a phone call, and it was important. You stopped at a pay phone. How many of you all used a pay phone? How many of you don't use a little pay phone? Few of you. Not too many, huh? It's all changed. GPS. How many of you could look and see where you're supposed to go and if you were lost or not? We didn't know unless we could see somebody along the road. And if you were on Route 20 at night or Route 19, you couldn't find anybody. You might be lost for a long time before you knew to turn around. You start thinking of all these things we take for granted today. It wasn't the way life was. But life wasn't that bad either. It was a little bit more time for each other. We didn't stay in much and play. We were always outside playing. We didn't have computers or Nintendos. We didn't have any of that. We were out playing in the yard, playing in the woods, doing something, making friends, making sure we were very creative and thinking of things to do all the time. So my childhood was very normal. Very normal. Little town, 300 people. When you think about Farmington, 300 people in that little town. 500 on a good day. Basically 300 to 500. I grew up, my high school, I went from 7th grade to 12th grade in the same school. I went from 1st grade to 6th grade in the same school. So I was always with either younger or older people. And you know what? Everybody took care of everybody. If I was in 1st and 2nd grade and in 6th grade, they wanted to make sure nobody took care of me. They helped me. They didn't pick on me. They didn't bully me. They helped me. When I was in 7th grade, And the 12th graders, who would think about putting an 18-year-old with a 12-year-old today? We couldn't wait for that. When I was in 7th grade, our football coach let us go out for football. Think about this. 7th grade, I'm 12 years old, and there's an 18-year-old. There's no way I'm going to play against them. But he wanted us to be part of the team. So to be part of the team, to do the little grunt work that had to be done, cleaning up the field and all that, he gave us a uniform to make us feel like we were part of the team. So I thought, what's a big deal? And I got to tell you, the shoulder pads came clear down to here. The vest I had on took clear down to my waist. My hip pads took care of my thighs. My thigh pads took care of my knees. And my knee pads took care of my shins. Now, that went on for 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade. And I said, hey, Coach, when are we ever going to get to play? He says, whenever that uniform's filled out. He figured when the uniform fit, it was time for me to play. Now, when you think about it, it's pretty sound logic. Pretty sound logic. It kept me interested. I was learning. I was always contributing. I always felt like I was part of something. And I never did play a minute until I was in 10th grade. So for 4 years, I just participated. And I was building. I was ready. And when I got to play, I was able to do pretty good. And then from then on, it was something. So I keep looking back at those times. My grandfather had a grocery store. I worked in a grocery store in Farmington. So I learned a lot about retail, how you satisfy customers. When you go buy something, someone's nice, do you like it? And they say thank you, and they treat you good. When someone doesn't treat you very good, you buy something almost like you're bothering them. When you go in and buy something, or you go with your family, it makes you feel bad, doesn't it? You don't want to go back there. I always knew that for me to survive, or my family to survive, we had to treat people good and have a good product. So I always worried about that. Fast forward, I've become in the political arena. I always felt that every one of you was the customers that we had. So we call it retail government. Retail government meant, how are we treated? Did we give you the service you liked? Did we give you the service you would brag about? Would you go home and tell your family and friends about it? Is it a place you wanted to come back and do business again? That's how we treated West Virginia. So we called it retail government. And that's really what it's all about. We had a good product. The state of West Virginia is a good product. I thought we had good value. We changed the tax system, the code. We did a lot of things. And we had great people. And all we had to do was make sure that we sold it. So that means we had to have good service. So if you got a good product, the state of West Virginia, you got value to it, you're being fair in your pricing. If you can give good service, you might have a chance of doing pretty good. And that's what we were trying to do. So it was a whole mindset that was changing, everybody buying into it, everybody understanding what our purpose was. And we did that. So when I look back at some of the things, I looked at some of the pictures that was up earlier, and Joe had kind of rolling through that, it brought back a flood of memories. A lot of people talk about labor of love. This was a job of joy for me. So from a labor of love to a job of joy, I don't know if it gets any better than that. I woke up, I couldn't wait for daybreak every morning. For 6 years, I couldn't wait for it to get sunshine so I could go to work. Sometimes I went to work when it was still dark. And I couldn't wait to the end of the day to see what we accomplished. So if you can find a job like that, that's pretty special. And I felt good about it. But we were challenged. We had a lot of challenges. The Sago was my first big challenge of the Sago mine disaster. And when we got hit with that, I just knew that we had to take care of the families that were still grieving and waiting on seeing what the fate of their loved ones were. So we had to give them comfort. We had to do everything we could. And I knew that there was things that we had not done that we could do much better. So as soon as we got through this horrible tragedy, we started changing the laws of West Virginia. The most important thing we did is we empowered every miner to understand they were responsible for their workplace. They were responsible as much as the person they worked for. They had a right and a responsibility to make sure it was safe. And they should not go to work not expected to come home safe to their family. And there shouldn't be a workplace in West Virginia that allowed that to happen. I believe that with all of my heart. So we set up hotlines, we did everything. I never had jurisdiction to do that. The only thing I knew is that because common sense told me that if they had the strength and the support of the governor saying, if you're in an unsafe condition and you're being forced to work, give me a call. Just call me. By God, we're going to change it. You're not going to be held hostage. You're not going to be threatened with your job or your livelihood because somebody is trying to make a profit on this. It should be good for everybody. There should be a profit to be made. There should be a good work ethic. And there should be a good day's pay for the work that you give. And everybody comes out ahead. And that's what we pushed. And we did some of those things that were very good, I believe. I look back at some of the things that we really worked on. And what I would do is, I remember this thing as I was growing up. My father used to tell me, he said, Joe, the only thing new in this world is a pair of eyes. Everything else has kind of been copied, mimicked, and improved upon. So if you see something that's worked good, see if you can incorporate it into what you want to do and do it better, improve upon it. So I thought about that. So I hired a company immediately when I got elected to tell me who was the best in the country. Give me states about the size of West Virginia, what they were doing. They were doing much better than anybody else, and I knew I could do better than them. That's how we did things. I looked at New Mexico, I looked at Nevada, I looked at different states, and we started figuring out what they were doing and how we could do it better. That's where we got workers' comp reform. We got a lot of these things that we did, and we changed things. I knew when I came in, we had some hard financial times when I'd gotten here, and we were going to change that. My grandfather used to tell me this. He used to say, Joe, if you want to keep yourself, if you're inclined to help people, keep yourself strong. And I said, okay, Papa, what do you mean by that? He says, I don't mean just mentally and physically. You have to be financially strong. He said, it's easy to tell somebody, oh, don't worry, I wish I could help you. Or I'm going to promise you something. They never could do it. They couldn't afford it. So you got to keep yourself financially strong. So I took off and went to Wall Street. The day I got elected was November the 4th. By November the 7th, I'm in New York. I'm talking to Fitch's, Standard & Poor's, and Moody's, which is the bankers. And Charlie, they told me about the health and well-being of this company called West Virginia that I just was elected CEO. And I wanted to know about it. And why they didn't have us a higher credit rating, what we could do to improve upon it. So I took everything they gave me, and I come back home, I said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to change all these things. We're going to get better. And we did. It was tough, but we did it. Because we had a purpose. Our values were based around our priorities. And if your values and your priorities match up, you're going to be okay. I knew we had to take care of children. I knew you all had to have an education. You had to be fed in school, you had to be taken care of. And you had to make sure you had an opportunity to take care of yourself. So education. Clothing vouchers. I'll never forget this. Clothing vouchers. I think we were at $100, we increased the amount to $200, I believe, at that time. Someone says, well, we can't afford it. I said, we can't afford not to. And we did it. We did things that people thought couldn't be done because it was our priorities. We said no a lot to things that we would have liked to have done, but we just couldn't afford it. And we, same as everybody, you don't do everything you want to. You don't get everything you ask for. You get the things you need. I think your family takes care of that and makes sure. And that's what we were trying to do. So I'll never forget, after we did the clothing vouchers, probably the most memorable time of my life being governor, for those 6 years and all the things, and 420,000 images and all the papers and archives that we have, Joe. A little girl came up to me, she had to be maybe 12 years old, and she's tugging on me. She said, I want to say thank you. I want to thank you. And I said, what for? And she says, you allow me to fit in. That's all she said. And what she meant, the clothing voucher allowed her to fit in. She was able to go to school and have the clothes that she wanted to fit in. That's pretty special. So those little things there touch you as much as anything, any of the big things we did. We reduced the food tax, cut it in half. We reduced the corporate net, reduced all of our taxes. We basically gave people a chance to be something and do something. Gave them a competitive edge, hopefully. So I look at all of these things. My wife is not able, Yale's not able because they're down. And she's president of the State Board of Education, and they're interviewing for a new superintendent. Hopefully they'll come to a conclusion fairly soon and be able to hire somebody that'll move education to the next level. With all the good things that's been done, we've got to continue to improve. And we're going to see if that can be done. So these are the things I look back on, water and sewer. I always put a priority on the necessities of life. My grandmother, so when I'm referring to things I'm talking about, which are people in my life as I refer back to. I said, you're a product of your environment. There'll be things as you get older you'll think about. My mom told me that, or my grandfather told me that, or my aunt told me that, or my uncle told me that, or my dear neighbor who loved me so much told me something that really made sense. You'll think about that as you get older. And my grandmother, she was always concerned that people have a roof over their head, clothes on their back, and enough to eat. That's all she cared. She didn't care about all the other stuff. All the frills and all bells and whistles didn't mean a thing to her. So she opened up her house. So it wasn't she just spoke about it. Back in those days, we didn't have all the social services. So Mama Kay opened her house up. But she made, there was 20 little grandchildren, all of us lived right close to her, a bunch of us. She made us whitewash whitewash, people don't know I'm thinking about whitewashing. They don't know what I'm talking about probably. We'd have to whitewash the basement, keep it clean, so anybody that needed a place to stay, they'd always have a nice clean place. Mama Kay had rules. So I learned that basically to have any order, you have to have rules. And her rule was that you couldn't cuss, you couldn't drink alcohol, and you had to work if you wanted to stay with Mama Kay. Pretty simple rules, but they worked. And every now and then somebody would come and maybe somebody drank a little bit too much beer or something at one time, and I'd say, "Where's Deloitte?" And she says, "Oh, Deloitte's on the tube. He'll be gone for about 5 or 6 weeks, but he'll be back." So we'd cycle, and Jim Patrol knows exactly. He grew up with me, he knows about all this. So we had them all, but we had nicknames for everybody. And back then, people would ride the train. You ever hear that, riding the train? It's not riding the train the way you think of riding the train. And these people would kind of jump on and jump off. And the freight train used to go through these little coal mining towns. And Jason Pizzatel is here from the governor's office. But Jason's from Fairmont. Boy, he knows Farmington real well. So we'd have people that would jump the train every now and then. Once they knew Mama Kay take care of them, that was the place they jumped off. But we had names for everybody. We had Wilbar Willie and Peg Leg Peggy, and we had them all. And it just got quite a colorful group of people we grew up with. And I keep thinking back on that. So Mama Kay kept saying, we've got to make sure that you have food and shelter. So when I started doing the programs we did, the senior center, the senior services, my grandmother was 85 years old in Rachel, and I went to visit with her, 85 years of age. And I said, "Grandma Gus," and she looked very lethargic this day, and she'd always greet you, "Hi, honey, how you doing? So wonderful." She was just very lethargic, and I went home, and my mother had been trying to get my grandmother to come live with her. And my grandmother would not leave the home place in Rachel, another little coal mining town. So I went home this day and said, "Hey, Mom, something's wrong. You got to go see Grandma. Something's wrong." So she goes up and sees Grandma. And she says, "Hey, Mom," she says, "why don't you come down and visit the kids? They want to see you." And Grandma, she says, "Okay, honey." And that was time for Grandma. She came down. What happened is she was lonely. She was living by herself at 85 years old. She wasn't cooking properly. She wasn't eating nutritionally. Things weren't being done. Okay? Well, guess what? Grandma lived 100. She came down to visit and stayed 15 years. But now, you know what that taught me? In-home services. So we dedicated every penny we had to take care of our seniors that wanted to live in their home. They had family around them. They were independent. They lived a quality of life. They were still productive. And these programs, we grew these programs because that was who we are, the values. Our Head Start programs and the money we put towards that, we grew those. Because if you don't have a good start in life, you're going to say, "Well, I might not do as good as I can." And you've got to do good, because if you don't do good, we're not going to do good. And then our veterans. Right now you've been hearing a lot about veterans. Well, when you think a person puts a uniform on, last night I spoke in Washington, D.C. to a group of people from around the country that are basically POW MIA families, still having loved ones that are missing. We have 1,600 Americans still missing from the Vietnam War. 1,642 to be exact. Still missing. The families still don't know after 45 years what happened to them. Could any of them still possibly be alive? How did they die? Where's their remains? How can we bring them back? But when you think about everybody that puts a uniform on, there's less than 1% of the Americans that are basically defending this country. They'll put the uniform on, willing to take a bullet and die for you. And when you think about that, that's pretty special. So I knew we had to take care of our veterans, which I still believe this country is committed to very much. So in all of this, I look back on today, and it's something, I have fond memories, but I'm going to have even more fond memories of looking at all the things that you've been able to collect. Because I can look and I can remember something from each one of these pictures. That's how special this is. But so let me just say thank you, Randall, Joe, entire staff here, Kay and all of them, to all the people that are involved in this and for providing this to the governor's office, Earl Ray, my dear friend, and to all of you all here representing him. To all of you, it truly was a job of joy. And it's one I still think of professionally. West Virginia is part of who we are. No matter where you go, whenever you grow up and you all do whatever you're going to do in life, this will always be home. This will always be a special place for you. I just hope it's special enough that you want to stay here and make it even better. That's all I can ask all the students here. If you'll think about that first. If it's special and you love it, then let's give something back. Let's do something. Remember this, you belong to it. You own it. It's part of yours. It belongs to all of us. Okay? Thank you so much. I appreciate it. God bless you.
What we're looking at is the finding aid that we created for Governor Manchin's papers. The first few boxes are of speeches, and as you can see, Susan Holbrook chronologized all of these so that you could find. There was a lot of work done, a lot of speeches, as you can see. And then we get down through here and we get into the events.
Joe, this is the video stuff, is that right?
Yes. And Dick just put that here.
That's great.
He just, yeah. He enjoyed coming back with last year. Senator O'Connor brought her in. She couldn't believe our justice system.
I'm not sure.
There's Jennifer. She's been great. She still comes. Jennifer Gardner comes by the office all the time, and she's been a great ambassador. Catherine?
Yes.
Cheryl? That was in Wheeling. In Wheeling, the president's numbers weren't very good. That's Nick Saban, my good buddy. We grew up together and close to Farmington and Warwood. But when the president came in, President Bush, I'll never forget this. He came in, his numbers weren't that great. His poll numbers, he wasn't doing real well then. And my numbers were still pretty good. But, you know, I just thought, out of respect, no matter who comes, when the president comes to your state, that was the thing, that was a good thing. And I thought, well, you should, out of respect, you always meet your president, thank him for coming and this and that. So I met him and everything. I went through that and came off Air Force One and I met him. He said, come on, get in the car with me. And I said, Mr. President, I said, I really shouldn't be there. I said, I've got security with me and all that. And he said, I got more security than you got. I said, you got to make a point there. I said, I have my wife with me. He said, I'll bring Gail too. Now, mind you, a month later, we just got back from Afghanistan. He and his brother Jeb and I were together and some other ones. And I tried to steal something out of the Oval Office from him. Because I said, the good West Virginia is not going to go to the Oval Office, not taking momentum, So there were some trinkets he had on his desk, on the president's desk in the Oval Office. And I went and grabbed a couple, and Jeb grabbed my hand. He says, he has the Argentina soccer team here. And he said, he's going to pass those up Webner National Instant because you stole the trinket. So the president, George, walks in, and Jeb's brother, he says, Manchin, you're trying to steal stuff off your desk. I said, oh, thanks, Jeb. He said, well, Joe, you don't have to steal anything. I'll give you something. So he gave me some cufflinks and this and that. So while I'm telling you that, we got in that big armored vehicle of his to take me from the airport. We went downtown Wheeling. And he says, I looked around and said, Joe, you can't steal anything here. He said, all the patches are sewed on. I was going to try to take a United States president still off. And he laughed and said, you can't steal anything. That was Katrina.
Flipping back on. Flipping
Flip
back.
back over. Well, that's it. It was, what a ride. What a ride.
Oh, yeah.